Hello. I thought I'd rumble through another tournament review quickly. So this was a local one to me in Banbury, 700 points GBHL 80, so it's meant to be quite chill. Um, and Tio was also local to the Oxford team. Yeah, I think it was his first Middle Earth event, and obviously it went well, so that's good. Um, so I was kind of umming and ahhing what to bring, as is my way. Because it's GBHL 80, I thought I'd bring something a bit more chill, but still good. And originally I was thinking Mordor, and then maybe something like Shagrat, a Ringwraith, Shelob, and then Gorbag, and kind of seeing how that went, and then just with a bunch of orcs and stuff. And then I was just like, oh, maybe I'll bring the Balrog out of retirement and do Depths of Moir again, because I used to quite like that. And it's kind of fun, because obviously the Balrog's kind of prone to botching and whatever else. So, yes. But then I kind of thought, and half of the attendees were members of my GBHL team, and I thought they'd all bring the sweat. So I thought, well, I'd better also bring the sweat. So that's how I landed on the Dragon Emperor, because I get on quite well with him. I know it's quite a simple list, but I understand it quite well. So my list was the Dragon Emperor, obviously. He's leading 15 Black Dragons with Pike and Shield, a Black Dragon Cataphat, and then a Cataphat with Drum. Rutabi was leading the second warband with 6 Warriors with Shield, 2 with bow, 2 with pike and shield, and 2 acolytes. And then finally, I had a dragon knight on armored horse with 2 black dragon cataphracts. So 34 models at 700 points. So obviously slightly low on the old model count. But I suppose, yeah, the idea is just to obviously grind out your opponent and ideally just not lose fights. If you're able to fight 3 ranks deep with a reroll, obviously fight 5, often you'll be higher. So you're probably winning fights and hopefully not losing too many dudes if you can stick together around the Emperor. So we knew which pools we'd be vetoing from, which was interesting. So it was from the um, maneuver scenarios and then the objective scenarios, and then I think the unique scenario pools. So there was nothing sort of overly killy. So obviously we didn't draw the one with like Lords of Battle and stuff. So that sort of partly factored in it as the Emperor's sort of a pretty good all rounder, so he can kind of do everything well. Yeah, so I mean that's what I took. Obviously, it's not the most interesting thing I've not the most interesting choice. Cool. So on to game one. So my esteemed colleague Tom Rice was going to the tournament as well as part of my GBHL team, and I sort of said to him when we got there, I bet we're gonna draw a match because it's like sod's law that you go to a tournament, you end up playing in the first round the person you play the most. Because obviously, first round you could be drawing against anyone. And sure enough, I drew Tom in the first round. So Tom was bringing quite a cool list actually. It's kind of, I don't know, it kind of strikes me as old school Harad almost. Because he had Suladan on horse, and then the Betrayer on horse, and then Sprinkling of Mordor led by Gorbag. So the Haradrim was there's a lot of warriors with bow, a few Watchers of Kana with bow, and then a few merchant guard and normal Watchers of Kana sort of sprinkled in with some servant guard as well. And then you had 6 cav, I think 4 of them serpent riders, the other 2 raiders. So that was pretty good, and he had a pretty high model count. I think it was in the low 40s, I think. But yeah, so that was a good one. Um, so we drew obviously the first pool, and we both vetoed. So I vetoed the one where he'd, um, be more able to shoot me, where you can just deploy at the back. Domination, I think it was. I vetoed that one, and he vetoed capture and control because obviously there's a chance his warbands have to deploy near the middle, and obviously he wants to sit back and shoot. So we ended up on breakthrough. Just to explain in the pictures, James can't read the rules properly, so I put an objective in the middle, but there is actually no objective in the middle. Um, on the centre line. It didn't actually matter for the whole game, so that was fine. It's meant to be 2 on the centre line, then 1 in my table half, 1 in Tom's table half. I think Tom played it right in that he deployed back and then just obviously set up a a shooting wall, just a firing line. And again, I kind of played it sensibly and just deployed on the middle line and just drummed twice. So yeah, I was moving for 2 turns. So we got 2 turns of shooting, and the 3rd turn I was able to charge. He didn't sort of kite any more, which obviously you could, I guess, move back for another turn of shooting. But I think 2 drums, I was able to get so close to him, it wasn't. It's been quite difficult to pull off, and also obviously the downside of this strategy is deploying away from the objectives. Excuse me. But his first 2 turns actually of shooting were absolutely brutal. So he killed 7 dudes before we got into combat. So I'd already basically lost a quarter of my army before I'd managed to get involved, which is exactly what he needed to be doing. Yeah, and my first round of combat was a bit guff as well, which didn't help. So I mean, how I set things up was basically just getting the normal Easterlings at the front, Black Dragons behind. So Ratabi's warband was basically deployed in front of the Emperor's warband. Emperor was just in the middle. He was a bit of a target, but I was, the first turn of shooting, I was just like, well, see what happens. I didn't think he'd actually get any wounds. And to be fair, he got 2 wounds that round, so that kind of made sense. And then the second turn, I was so close to him that only a few archers could target him, so I was just like, sod it, I'll just leave him in the front rank, which I know is a bit risky. But yeah, so that's what I did, and Rutabi was sort of hanging back around the around the flanks, trying to get involved, and there was a bit of wooded terrain, so yeah, I basically just use that to anchor my flank, and then on the other flank I used another piece of difficult terrain to anchor it. Tom threatened to run past me with his calves, so it meant I had to basically detach all of my cav, so Dragon Knight's warband and the 2 from the Dragon Emperor, to go and block them. So it meant I was a bit thin in the middle, and obviously, as I said, after the first round of combat, I lost a bunch more dudes because it's just one of those rounds where just all your rolls are a bit guff, and I lost some more dudes. And obviously, I killed a few, but Gorbag was an absolute chad as well early game. I mean, he just sort of charged into 2 dudes, just got up to 5-5, and then just killed them. It was just like it's scary. But basically, the story of the middle is like the main sort of lines clashing is of the Emperor not doing much the whole game. So he, I think he sort of fairly reliably killed a guy or 2 a turn. There's one turn where he botched but didn't take a wound or anything. So he was kind of there just as a force multiplier, really, and as a massive base to mean that I could basically hold that gap and try and block Tom from running past me, which is what I was scared of the whole time. Because if he had sort of way more models than me, slipping some through would be a bit of a nightmare. And I only had 2 archers at the back to hold my sort of back objectives, and then I was kind of relying on the cav finishing off his cav, then coming back to the middle to claim objectives. So that's what I was worried about. But then my dice just completely picked up, and it's one of those where Tom's dice are fairly average, and he got the occasional 6, but it's just when he got the 6, I just, got the 6 myself, especially with the banner reroll. And yeah, I was starting to rack up the bodies really, and it's one of those games where I couldn't actually sort of point to a particular turn or event in the game where I just killed a bunch of dudes, and that's kind of what swung it. It's just that grind that the Dragon Emperor's pretty good at. Is he's killing a model a turn. Rutabi, I mean, I won't go into too much detail because it's not that interesting in the sort of first half of the game, but she sort of charge some dudes and sort of charged someone and did heroic combat and got into cav model and killed them and that sort of thing. So I kind of neutered Tom's cavalry because he sent I think I think he sent two of them sort of round the flank, and my cataphract sort of bounced off them a little bit, but eventually was able to see them off with the help of the Black Dragon. So the Black Dragon Knight. So I had to sort of get him involved to get the fight 5 and all those attacks to actually just get in and slap because my cataphracts just couldn't seem to do it by themselves. But yeah, Rutabi sort of blunted the other cav. So Tom's cav were out of the game, which was pretty massive because I think those running behind my line would have been difficult to deal with. And basically sort of towards the middle of the game, I'd obviously cleared up on my left flank and then basically brought my Dragon Knight background to the middle to try and assist because I had detached my drummer to charge into Gorbag with Rutabi. I think Tom won the strike off twice, which is just one of those. But failed to wound her both times. But he did sort of kill the cataphract, which is a bit annoying. Because obviously, if I'd have won, that would have been good because I'd be getting a knockdown bonus for the the cavalry charge and stuff. But it's just one of those. It's just strikes, isn't it? They sort of can be a bit funny sometimes. Although it wasn't that funny to be fair because he was fight 5, I was fight 6. It's not a massive difference. But yeah, the Black Dragon Knight sort of came back round into the middle, and then eventually, so Gorbag sort of just held up Rutabi for most of the game, and then eventually I think I was able to get the Dragon Knight in. And I think Gorbag was out of might by that point. I think and I was able to just get the Dragon Knight and Rutabi in. I think together they polished him off, but he basically held up Rutabi for most of the game, which was which is sad. So I think Gorbag was probably man of the match actually, because he's such a cheap model, but he's just horrible to deal with. Because obviously, if I lose priority, then he charges 2 models, gets up to fight 5, and then I'm on 6s to wound him still. So with my normal infantry, so he's pretty nasty. But yeah, so and then the rest of my cavalry on my left sort of moved to the objectives, and that was all good. And then in the middle, I just sort of continued to grind them out. And the Betrayer did chuck some spells throughout the course of the game, but Tom rolled absolute guff. And I think the only time he sort of came close was he did a 2 dice transfix on Rutabi, and I was just like, sold out, I'll just chuck both my dice at it because I think it was the turn she was in trying to finish off Gorbag at last, and I was able to resist. So it was just the Master of Poisons that he was there for, which, to be fair, was pretty handy, especially with the shooting in the first couple of turns. And yeah, that's pretty much really. I broke Tom, but he had Suladan, so he didn't really get Suladan involved until the last turn, because I think it's. So I was sort of mulling this over afterwards, and he did call a few moves, so he didn't have tons of might, and he could have sort of chucked him in and maybe used his last, maybe used the might to strike up or something, and maybe kill a couple of dudes, but I don't know, it's kind of risk reward, isn't it? Because especially if he loses that combat, then that's kind of quite easy leader points being lost, and especially if he doesn't have the might to strike up, it's just charging into a fight 5 block isn't really going to work. But yeah, I basically won the last couple of key sort of heroic move roll-off / priorities and was able to sort of tie up all his dudes well away from the sort of centre of the board. But I also broke in the last actually, the penultimate turn, so I did have to take one sort of series of courage tests, which didn't really affect too much. To be honest, for courage for both of us didn't really matter because Sully was there rallying his dudes, and I had a bunch of black dragons, and obviously I got the Easterling special rule as well, which is nice. And the +1 courage. So yeah, that was pretty smooth. He rolled Snake Eyes on the Betrayer for his courage test though, so that's basically a classic Tom move. So he did it when we were playing Warhammer World, when I was playing my Sauron against his Mahud Harad. Yeah, the Harad King rolled Snake Eyes then. So it's definitely something about Tom rolling Snake Eyes on courage. It's definitely I don't know. He's obviously got some sort of curse on him or something. But yeah, basically the game ended with me controlling my back objective, the two middle objectives. We'd both broken each other, and we both had exactly the same amount of models on his objective, which meant I didn't quite claim that. In retrospect, I should have probably dismounted the Dragon Emperor, but I wasn't using my brain. That's okay. I mean, it didn't really matter. I think I won that one quite handily. And we were talking afterwards, and I sort of said to Tom that I was just really scared that you were gonna just sort of run loads of dudes past me, and I wasn't gonna have enough guys to manage it. Um, but then we were sort of saying that actually, if we have something like equal models in the middle, then my shield, my pike block will probably just bunch his. So I think he did need to hang back, shoot me, reduce my numbers even more. So by the time we got in, he had like a 15 or so model advantage, and then he needs to leverage those numbers to reduce me even more, and then run behind me. But I think it just went wrong with the dice, really. I think because he in the first round of combat he killed some more dudes. But bearing in mind he killed 7 with shooting, I think he must have killed 2 or 3 more in the first round of combat. I only broke at the end of the game, and I only needed to lose 18 models. So killing 8 models over the rest of the game isn't that much. And again, it's just more of a dice issue. So I don't really know what Tom. I think Tom played definitely the first half, right? I don't really know what I'd have done in the second half. It's probably roll more sixes, I guess. I forgot to say one of the gimmick of the tournament is that we all get one re-roll for anything per game. I Master have battled with Rutabi 3 times and rolled a 2 3 times, and then I basically had to use one of my. I used my re-roll to re-roll one of the Master of Battles to succeed, so that was nice. I can't remember what Tom used his for, to be honest. I think he rolled a bad roll into a bad roll, so I don't think it really made any difference. But yeah, that was it. So I've won that one and have bragging rights over Tom, which is nice. It was quite a nice game to start with, actually, because obviously there's a lot of thinking, but it was also quite chill. So that was quite good start to the day. So on to game 2. So game 2 was the unique scenarios. I was playing Ruth, which was nice because I played Ruth at the club a couple of times, and we're both local. I've played her Ents before, and I've played her Moria before, but she brought her Ents to this one. So her list was Treebeard with Merry and Pippin, 3 Ents, and then Quick Beam. So he's the one with movement 8 and March, but no strike. And I vetoed Assassination, I think, just because it was the most killy one, and I was just not down to down for that. And then she vetoed Clash by Moonlight. I only had 2 bows, but I think it was just I think basically Assassination and Fog of War suited her better. So we ended up playing Fog of War, which I think was the second best scenario for me out of that lot, I reckon. So the board was quite open. So we sort of had 3 terrain pieces in each of our halves. So I had a terrain piece with pillars sort of near the front, and then sort of big boneyard at the back, and then the building near my back as well. And then her side had a hill and then some pillars and a pyramid. So I could have chosen Merry, Pippin, or Quick Beam to kill, and I basically did not want to deal with Treebeard in any way whatsoever. So I chose Quick Beam because he has no strike, and I have a lot of strike. So I was thinking, if I can just absolutely gank Quick Beam and then protect Rutabi and the Dragon Knight, then I'll be laughing. Because I chose to protect Rutabi just because I tend to have the temptation to banzai my Dragon Knight in, which also kind of made me think she was going for my Dragon Knight. So I sensed he wasn't going to play much of a role in the game, to be honest. And yeah, obviously she chose. Oh, and in terms of terrain pieces, I chose the pyramid on my left because it was closest to my table edge, and also I can hide behind it whilst being in base contact with it to claim it. So that was cool. Yeah, so obviously I had to worry about who Ruth was protecting, who she was trying to kill, and the terrain piece. I wasn't too worried about the terrain piece because I could probably get more bodies on it than her. But yeah, going into the game, I do this every time because I think I've played Herentz twice or three times. I can't remember now. But I kind of crap myself every time because I'm just like, oh god, if she sort of rolls sixes and starts hurling stuff around, obviously you can bludgeon the Emperor, which is not good for me. And yeah, I mean it's just kind of one of those. If the Ents roll a bunch of sixes and my strikes don't go well, and or I sort of spend all my might doing strikes but don't kill enough stuff, and then I have no might, and then if I lose the roll offs, it's kind of like there's not really much I can do. So I was kind of bricking it. But yeah, Ruth kind of deployed in a rough sort of line, chucked a few big stones at me. I think not much happened initially. I think she chucked a stone later and killed a cataphract, which is cool. I think she also chucked a. Yeah, well, actually, that's jumping the gun a bit, but there was another stone later, which was interesting. Um, yeah, so that was kind of that really, and I sort of marched forwards a couple of times with the drum, because obviously this is a 12-inch deployment. I basically just balled up, drummed, pushed everyone forwards. I kind of had my guys mostly anchored between the pyramid and the pillar to sort of protect both flanks. Dragon Emperor in the middle, Rutabi at the front and center of the shield wall, and then the Black Dragon off to the right. I think the Dragon Knight was kind of just keeping out of trouble, and also was kind of there when I needed to call on him. He could sort of come back into the middle, I guess. I also had some cav around the outside, and that was just to run past and tag all three possible objective pieces, because that's my style with Fog of War. Is I just tag everything, and then at the end of the game, then if I'm looking like I'm going to get broken, I'll go and just cover the thing I'm actually going for to do that, but try and keep people guessing during the game. So I mean that's pretty much it. And then Ruth won a priority, and basically just sort of moved the Ents towards my shield wall. And she charged Quick Beam and another Ent into my shield wall. So the other Ent was into Rutabi and Quick Beam was into Big Daddy Emperor. And I basically did very well on the courage tests. Got enough dudes to, passed enough tests to get enough dudes in to sort of trap and get pike blocks going and all that sort of nonsense. And basically, the first turn of combat, I won the strike off with the Emperor and did 4 wounds on Quick Beam, but I had to spend all of my might. So I spent 1 might to strike and then 2 to. I can't remember what I needed now. I don't know if it was converting 5s into 6s or whatever. But yes, I basically was just like, yes, I shall spend all the might, and that's that. And Quick Beam's dead, and my target's dead, and that's fantastic. And now there's only 1 Ent with might. Because obviously the risk is not like just the strike, but it's if I either lose the strike or roll low or run out of might and have to fight him later, he has might to win combats. So I think taking those 3 mites off was pretty good. Yeah, again I sort of attacked the other Ent, and I think I only took like 1 wound off. It was a bit sad. And then yeah, it was just kind of Treebeard was trying to come in, and I think Ruth had an option to hurl a model with Treebeard into the combat with the second Ent, but decided not to, because I think it's kind of one of those where, in terms of the long game, it kind of maybe would wasted a point of might, but I'd still strike with Rutabi and then probably win the combat, and everyone would just stand up instead of making strikes. So I think I can't remember what he did in the end. I'm not sure if he just just killed a bunch of dudes he was in combat with. But but I kind of blocked him out from my heroes with some chaff anyway. And then the next round of combat, the end at the back came in and got surrounded as well. And to be fair, I was terrified of these Ents, and for the whole first half of the game, I think Ruth rolled no higher than a 4, apart from Treebeard, who got 6s for the entire game almost. um, so even the Ent at the back, where I didn't have a strike on him, he just sort of didn't roll high, and then I think it took 2 turns of combat to take him down, and then I took the other Ent that was sort of in the middle down, and Treebeard decided to Brexit basically because he couldn't really get into any juicy stuff. So I think Ruth thought he's going to run around the side with his remaining friend and then sort of tag the objective that she was going for at least, and then sort of see what's what. And during this, I sort of figured that she was going for my Dragon Knight, so he basically just ran away the whole game and basically ran from my far right flank sort of back to my back line, then back across, and ended the game in base contact with the pyramid. But Treebeard did get a lucky stone, but it hit his horse and not him, so that was pretty unlucky. Yeah, and he had to spend a point of might because no, this is where I used my reroll. So I think I rerolled. What did I do? I rerolled a Throne Rider 1 into another 1, so that to still spend the might to not take a wound, because obviously assuming he is the target, then he's got no fate or anything. So it's just like if I take a strength 3 wound, then it's just not great for me. And then basically the rest of the game is sort of me just chasing the Ents around. Treebeard did some business. Killed some dudes, won a few combats. He was never really in enough guys to kind of need to do too much in terms of hurling or barging or whatever. So, because although I didn't sort of have a strong game plan going into this, I think I did. Well, to be fair, once I'd sort of got my head in the game, because I find that after lunch I'm just awful for like the first half an hour or so. But once I'd kind of remembered how to play the game, I think I did what I needed to do in terms of model placement to sort of mitigate hurls and stuff and prevent barges. Merry and Pippin dismounted, presumably to sort of get more bodies on the objective and also just for funsies. But unfortunately, they were surrounded and killed, although I think Merry ran off. He failed his courage test because obviously I'd killed 4 Ents and then Treebeard counts for 3 models with the hobbits, but they were obviously that means that they were broken and Merry buggered off and then Pippin was killed. But Treebeard was pretty untouched the whole game. I think I did 1 wound which was saved by fate. That's fine. And then the game ended the second round it could have, I think, and that was a clean sweep for me, which I wasn't really expecting because Ents still scare me. Even when they roll 4s, I'm still just like ugh. So I killed Quick Beam, I took the pyramid and was unbroken, and Rutabi was fine. And I think Ruth was trying to protect Quick Beam, kill what's his name? Killed the Dragon Knight, and after a while she was like, "Oh yeah, you can tell I'm killing the Dragon Knight," and I was just like, "I don't know if you're bluffing or not," and she was adamant she wasn't bluffing, and I was just like, "Yes, but are you bluffing?" But even though it was like really obvious, I was just like, "Is this whole thing just a bluff?" But it wasn't a bluff, and but the Dragon Emperor managed to get away. Yeah, so that was cool. Yeah, I think my dice were good, Ents not so good, and I think with Ents it's just kind of, if they can sort of, hurl stuff around and win combats, then they're scary. But if they roll 4 high for the majority of the game, then they're less scary. But yeah, it's just one of those really. I think we said at the beginning it would come down to dice basically. If Ents get good dice, I'm a bit screwed. But fortunately that wasn't the case. But it was a fun game, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. So. So that was it. On to game 3. Cool. So at the end of the second round, so start of the third round, I found myself on the top table, which is unusual, but not exactly unaccustomed to it as such. But I've been there a few times, and I always bottle the last game. It's it's just I don't know. I've been to the top table a number of times, and I think over half of those times I've then lost the sort of tournament winning game. So yes, I kind of um, sense that this is going to be difficult. I can't remember what we vetoed to be honest, but we ended up playing Divide and Conquer. I think I vetoed Storm the Camp just because I hate it as a scenario. It may or may not have been good for me. I don't really know. Probably not. I'll explain what I was up against in a second. And then my opponent Miles, I can't remember what he vetoed. He vetoed the other one. We ended up playing Divide and Conquer, which is where you deploy in opposite corners of the table. So you split your force in half, and then 3 objectives down the centre line, and you've basically got to get in and end the game stood next to the one in the centre, which is worth more, and then 2 side objectives, which were worth less. So I played Miles once before at Milton Keynes, where he brought his Rangers of Mirkwood, which was cool. And I remember that game, so I managed to outshoot elves with Uruk scouts, which was surprising. But yeah, this time he brought Fell Beings of Mirkwood, and I was slightly confident because I had never lost to Fell Beings of Mirkwood at this point. Although I know they are a very good list. But I was kind of like, yeah, it's doable. I can sort of just hang around the middle and win combats and then kill orcs, because when you kill orc, everyone sort of cheeses it eventually. Obviously there's just a bunch of not great courage heroes and, spiders and stuff with low courage. But his army had a few more beasties than I've come up against before, actually, because he had Razgush. In fact, it was kind of unusual in its composition. Not like saying good or bad. It was just kind of different to what I've come up against before. Because he had Razgush, an orc captain, an orc shaman, an orc taskmaster, and then the spider queen. The spider queen was leading 2 Mirkwood spiders and a bat swarm, which is obviously normal. But then 5 fell wargs, which is I don't tend to see those. People tend to just go for the spiders, but the wargs are actually a pretty good option, I think, because obviously the high speed strength force pretty good. And then orc-wise, just had a whole bunch of orcs and a total of 9 trackers. Yeah, so I was able to choose my table corners, and I kind of forgot about the woodland creature rule. So I basically chose basically the corner that was clearest, where I could just drum directly to the middle, and then there was one behind, where the deployment was behind a castle. But I was like, well, I'm just going to put my one sort of small cavalry warband there, and then they can sort of, run away quite quickly to meet the rest of my force, and I can basically get to the middle first and get my guys together first, and happy days, basically. In retrospect, what I should have probably done is deploy the other way around, because although it was a more convoluted route, it kind of doesn't matter that much, because I'm not sure I'd be boxed out that easily, because obviously with the Easterling grind I could probably sort of slowly steamroll towards the middle, even if I had to go around trees and lose a bit of movement that way. But this is what I ended up doing, and this is kind of where I completely underestimated Miles' strategy, basically, where I thought, well, because he called a march with the captain as well, so I was like, great, he's just going to sort of charge in and get stuck in. I'm going to win the sort of shield wall and shield wall situation, avoid sort of doing anything stupid in front of the spiders, and have, the sort of normal stuff where I have a couple of guys behind the Emperor to stop the bat swarms getting in, all the sort of normal jam. But then it was just like the cagiest game I've played in ages, in the sense that Miles basically hung back on both sides, and he kind of had a couple of spiders on the castle, so they could chuck paralyzers and stuff, and all the orcs basically kept moving forwards to try and entice me off the objectives, and then I sort of moved towards them, they moved back, and then same with the with the sort of spider queens warband is, yeah, I sort of moved towards them, they sort of moved away. And to be fair, I didn't, when I say I moved towards them, I didn't move that far. I just kind of, headed in that direction, and, a couple of turns of, yeah, well, if he moved forwards the next turn, I move forwards the next turn. That's a combat. It's kind of just over 6 inches apart, basically, with the orcs. But then he used the woodland creature to basically move back. And I think the idea was basically to draw me away from the objectives. And he had, and to be fair, I wasn't scared of the archers because I was just like, well, they're orc trackers, they're not that great. And I had a couple of archers, and I had some cav, so I was a bit like, well, actually, if I can just sort of force them to move by threatening them with cav and bring my two bows to bear, then that's not the worst thing ever. But then there was a couple of turns where he just shot my two archers. He shot my two archers out in one turn, I think, which was bad. And then yeah, I was a bit like, oh, I don't know, because I was trying to sort of castle around the middle and get a side objective in the middle, and basically just waste time. Like I move forwards, he moves back, I move back, he moves forwards, and just kind of do that for two hours, 15 minutes or whatever. Be like, cool, I'm in the middle, so I can do that. But he, I think he I mean, it wasn't sort of all boring in the sense that he moved a spider off the castle wall. Um, and to be fair, I had to call a heroic with my dragon knight, who was within 10 of him. Because I think he moved him off the wall. I moved my dragon knight towards him, which put him in 10. So if I won priority the next turn, he had no heroes around. So I could then just sort of go and nuke that spider, and then there's one less spider potentially paralysing me, which was good. But I had to call a heroic because I basically lost every priority after the first two turns until like the last two turns, where I think I won one of them. Which is a bit of a bummer, but there you go. And yeah, I basically went in, nuked that one spider, and then again he then sort of moved a lot of his orcs towards those three models, and I was wondering if he was trying to get me to charge him because Razgush would have been nearby, and which is obviously not great with a Dragon Knight with one might. And because I'd basically hid behind a wall with most of my dudes to just sort of counter his three orc trackers there. But yeah, in the end, I basically just ran them back towards the middle. But again, there was just one turn of shooting, which was really lucky. It was just pain in the ass. So I had two cataphracts. He shot and killed one of them, which is not like, it's not impossible, but it's just kind of unlikely. And but you shoot him enough times, it will happen, and that's basically what happened. But then the Merkwood Spider paralysed the other one. I was like, ah, and the Dragon Knight basically had sort of buggered off by this point. So those two were kind of on their own, just sort of threatening that area. So yeah, he obviously killed one, and then the spider jumped off the wall and munched the other one, which was a bummer because then that's my cav gone. And whilst this was happening on the other side, with his trackers, he was sort of slowly moving them towards the middle. And again, I was just like, well, if I can actually kill them, that kills his archer threat. So I moved two horses and some shields towards them. The shields are basically to try and block out the spider queen, and I was basically moving my emperor as a support piece so that I could get the banner and fight buff where I needed it, but he couldn't really actually himself get involved. And yeah, so that's kind of that kind of started to develop over there, and basically then started moving his archers back, but I managed to charge two of them with my drummer and then two of them with my other knight, and then my shields were nearby. But the theme of me losing priority continued, which is a bit annoying. But yeah, with the combats, my drummer killed two trackers, and then my other guy with two attacks and a reroll was beaten by two trackers, but not killed, fortunately. And then obviously he won the priority, and all his dudes were sort of lurking. But I kind of just wanted to end the shooting threat, and I think what would have been the smart play is just to then say, well, I've killed two trackers, let's run away back to the middle. But instead, I charged my two dudes into his. I kind of just charged them. In fact, I charged one of them because the other one he farted out a spider swarm and got it, and I basically left. I left two guys behind to basically surround that spider swarm and make sure I killed it, and then my free knight charged a couple of trackers, and yeah, I think I killed. I can't remember if I killed the trackers or not. To be honest, it kind of doesn't. Oh yeah, I won the combat, killed one of them. I did kill the spider swarm, but I basically really needed to win that subsequent combat to basically run everyone away from his dudes. And I know this is a really dumb way of doing strategy, and um, sort of kicked myself a little bit for it because, like I said, I should have just started moving backwards. But I'd lost so many priorities by this point. I was like, I think I'm going to win the next priority, so I can have done that, killed the spider swarm, killed two trackers, although I actually only killed one in the end, and then moved backwards, and then nothing of his could really get in range of mine. As it was, I lost that priority as well, and then it basically meant that all of my dudes, so my two cav and my two swords I left behind, got tagged, and basically everyone else, my other guys, were just moving back towards the objectives because I just didn't like this whole sort of spreading out really far from the objectives with a small part of my force. And they basically got surrounded and killed, which it's one of those things where I lost 4 models there, and I lost 2 models. I lost my 2 cav on the other side, so I'd lost a whole bunch of sort of mobile threat by this point, and yeah, so it's kind of like I was being chipped away at, and I think I killed a similar number of models, but it's a bit like, okay, I killed a few orcs and a spider, like who cares? And then we were basically approaching the end of the game, and I just because of time, and I sensed that the time was coming for him to commit, so I basically just deployed into a pike block to block all his orcs out, and kept just a bunch of stuff, including the Emperor at the back, to try and block out his sort of fast-moving warband. And yeah, I basically, to be honest, I didn't play this whole game very well, but my dice were a bit guff in combat because I sort of thought I'll just munch through these orcs, and I kind of killed, quite a few, but not that many. I mean, the Dragon Knight sort of charged in a couple of turns and killed some orcs. Rutabi killed some stuff. I was keeping him away from the objectives, and then yeah, but I kind of didn't really have an answer for the Spider Queen by this point because the stuff I left at the back just got absolutely munched. I had 4 guys in the middle that I thought I'd rush over to contest the side objective because there was only a few wargs. I was like, well, if I can kill the wargs and keep everyone else away, then that's probably worth doing. In retrospect, I should have probably just kept them in the middle for the numbers. But then I suppose if he had a free hand on that side objective, then he might have been able to throw even more stuff in the middle. So it probably didn't make too much difference. But it's just one of those where I lost a few key things. So Rutabi, did a combat, didn't go off, and Spider Queen was coming in and causing chaos, and it kind of came to it, and basically I was planning on dismounting the Emperor, but left it too late. So in the last turn, again there was a heroic move roll off, which I lost, and then. The Spider Queen, the Bat Swarm was in the Dragon Emperor. Spider Queen was nearby. And I was like, well, I have to call a combat with the Emperor to kill the Bat Swarm and a random orc I was in combat with, which is not sort of too strenuous to try and do. To at least kill the Bat Swarm and then make it equal fight with the Spider Queen. At which point I have way more dice, and I can't remember if you can dismount as part of a heroic combat or not, but if I could, I'd have looked it up basically, but it didn't matter in the end because I lost the combat roll off. But if I could, the plan was to basically win the combat, dismount everyone, rush to the middle, and do that. And obviously, since he won the roll off, he was able to tag a bunch of dudes to stop me sort of moving too much back towards the middle. But I was able to block out one of the side objectives, and he didn't have anyone nearby to get it. But basically, I lost the move roll off, and then I lost the combat roll off. So he was able to kill guys with the Queen, and then get him into the Emperor. He only caused 2 wounds on the Emperor, but I failed all 3 fate. 1s and 2s everywhere. It was just a bit painful. So I think my dice were horrific, but it kind of quite a few key roles, we were kind of like, yeah, if it had gone my way, then the odds are I probably still lost 'cause I didn't play it that well. But it might have helped, and maybe I don't know, maybe twisted it. But I basically got to the point where I was relying on things going my way to dig me out of a hole I was in. Which but when you reach that point, you're like, well, I've basically not played it well. So that's kind of one of those. So as it turns out, I think he. So what did he do? He must have broken me. He wounded my leader. He had the middle objective. But I think maybe I had a guy still alive. I can't remember now. And he had a side objective with more models, but the four guys I sent over to that far side, I think a couple of them were still alive contesting the objectives. That was fine. Then I had a side objective to myself. So I can't remember. I think I lost that like 8-2, something like that. Razgush was untouched. He wasn't broken. But yeah, it's just kind of one of those where I've been thinking about it. It was only yesterday, to be fair, but I've been thinking about it quite a lot. In that, I think the starting point is I should have picked it so I had the woodland in sort of my line of march, because the trouble was I had the drum and cavalry, and I know he had a lot of fast movers too, but I was like, well, I can actually catch your orcs quite easily, really. And even if that means I end up in a stupid place at the edge of the table, I have a drum. I have a drum to get back in, and the rest of his force is only wargs and spiders, which obviously are a threat, but if he tries to block me off with a bunch of wargs, I can sort of kill them. Obviously, Spider Queen's not to be underestimated, but overall that might have been a better plan. But I think me putting the woodland on both his sides meant that I could never get near him, because I basically couldn't get near his fast movers, because they'd sort of just run through the forest. Even if I had my cav and a drum, I just just hang out in the forest and just be a nightmare. And then his orcs, again, like I could have maybe used my cavalry, like concentrated my cavalry over there, and then that with a drum and infantry maybe. But again, he just kind of probably castle around the woodland. That would be such a pain in the ass for me. So I kind of put myself in a position where I was like, well, I'm not going to catch you, even though I have the drum and cavalry. And I think what I should have done is just continue to castle around the middle, not be drawn out, because I basically was drawn out to kill a spider, which I thought was a good trade, a point of might for a spider. But then I think I hung out there a turn too long, or it might have been the turn after I killed the spider. I can't even remember now. But yeah, and basically I lost 2 cav doing that, and then I was like, well, yeah, I got baited out with the trackers. And again, if it's just one of those where it's just like if buts and maybes. But if it had played out better and I'd taken off that archer threat, then suddenly I'm much happier to just castle around the middle bit. But that didn't work out, and I lost 2 cav and 2 swords. And this sort of chip damage meant that when we did get into combat and I didn't immediately kill loads of stuff, it kind of it was always going to put myself in a difficult position. So I think what I should have done is castle. So choose the other sides of the board, except I'm going to get to the middle slower, but have the woods at my back. And even if worst case scenario, some fast movers sort of mess about in the woods behind me, it's like, well, flanking doesn't matter as much in Lord of the Rings, in the sense that my pikebot can fight behind me just as easily as it can in front of me. So that's probably a number one. And then choose a side objective and a middle objective, and just castle. And to be fair, I know I was baited out with a couple of things, but overall I wasn't baited to run to one side of the board where I was never going to catch anything and then just lose that way. But I think just castle even harder, and just waste time sort of, moving towards him. He moves back, I move back, and we did do a bit of that, but probably just do that even harder, frankly. Yeah, and probably maybe even sending all of my cav after those trackers. But then I suppose if I'd have moved all my cav over there, then the Spider Queen probably come and say hello. But I don't know. It's just kind of a tricky one. I don't really know. Yeah, it's one of those ones I'd like to play again to see to see how it worked out. And to be fair, I enjoyed playing Miles. Miles is a nice opponent, but I think we both admitted the game was very dull in the sense that he didn't come and play until the last half an hour, and then we were just moving shit around, and it was like really boring. So if I deployed the other way, he then has to fight, and then we'd have had more of a game of it, if you see what I mean. But yeah, but he, it's not sort of to disparage, because he basically played what he needed to play, because I wanted him to come at me because I'd win. So because I'd then just I'd get my pike block up and just sort of steamroll, and if I could avoid a hurl from the Spider Queen or get Rutabil Dragon Knight in or something, then So basically, yeah, he didn't play the game that I wanted him to play, and you can't sort of he can't sort of disparage that. But yeah, so that was so two wins and a loss. I don't think any of them were easy games. I did feel bad bringing in the Dragon Emperor for obvious reasons, but because half of the people there were my team and then a couple of Khazad Brum sprinkled in, I assumed that the standard of list would probably be quite high. And obviously there was some Army of Lake Town, there was some Arnor, there was some Bears. There was Arnor, not Armor, Angmar with Gully and Witch King. So I didn't feel that bad once I saw everyone's list, but I still feel a little bad because it's an 80. But none of my games were easy in the sense that Tom's list at the start was tough because he would just shoot me a lot, and it kind of went well for him in the shooting phase, and obviously the dice didn't go his way in the combat, but that could have gone quite badly wrong if dice hadn't tipped in my favour and I hadn't been able to get all the manoeuvres I needed to right as well. And then obviously Ents are just kind of like swingy, so basically if I hadn't got the dice I needed and Ruth got a bunch of sixes, then again I can't, that's just the sort of lose situation. And then obviously, against FL Being's list against a good player to end with was a very tough game. But anyway, so it was good. It was a good event, and I finished. I forgot to say, I didn't even say where I finished. I finished third, which was nice because normally when you lose on top table in the last game, you get booted off the podium, which is always very sad. But I was behind Miles, who won the event. So yeah, it's not too bad when the only person who beat you was the guy who won the event, so that's good. And then Mr. Bissell came second with Bears, and then I came third. And that was it. It was a really good event. It was Simon's first event for Middle Earth, but it was all very very smooth, very good, very well TO'd basically, and yeah, definitely do it again, especially since it's like 20 minutes away from my house, which is good because obviously you have to drive to these things. So yeah, I'll keep an eye out, and we'll go back and probably take a more funsies list if it's another 80. But yeah, I'll stop rambling. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I'll see you at the next one.